Today's conversation with Dave and Ann Wilson is fantastic. You're going to want to take some notes, get a pen, get a notepad, get your phone out, and get ready for some good stuff from Dave and Ann Wilson coming up right now on Sports Spectrum.
Welcome to the Sports Spectrum podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. So glad you're tuning into our podcast today. I am Jason Romano, and this is Sports Spectrum. Make sure you check out our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the home base for all of our content here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. We got devotionals there. We got articles, different stories every single day. That's why you got to bookmark that page, sportspectrum.com, and a bunch of podcasts are there as well that you can listen to, including this one with Dave and Ann Wilson, authors of the new book, No Perfect Parents. Dave Wilson, 33 years as the team chaplain for the Detroit Lions. So he's got a ton of stories, and his wife Ann and him are just dynamite people. I've gotten to see them do their work as speakers. I've gotten to just get to know them a little bit. They had me on their show with FamilyLife Today, and they're just awesome. And I love where God has taken them and brought them into this season of life, being a voice that can speak into parenting and into marriage, and people that you need to watch and listen to. Hopefully today you are encouraged by Dave and Ann Wilson. So can't wait to bring you that conversation. Before we get to them, just want to say thank you to our partners and sponsors today, Compassion International and their Fill the Stadium initiative. And we are just doing amazing work here. It's been over a year since Fill the Stadium was created. It's fillthestadium.com if you're wondering about the website. And you know, our goal at that time was to fill 70,000 seats worth of kids who were going to go without a sponsorship because of the pandemic, and help raise enough money to fund 70,000 kids and their family during this global pandemic. And I'm happy to report that we're close to 50,000 seats being filled of the 70,000 that we were working towards. So God is doing an incredible work. We've got some amazing pro athlete friends that are a part of this ministry, but there's still a lot of work to go. So if you haven't given yet, and you feel tugged to or nudged, I guess is a better word, to join in and to donate. And it doesn't take a whole lot of money. If you have $10, like donate $10. That any of that helps these kids release from poverty. So if you can, check out fillthestadium.com, and any amount helps. It really does change a family's life, not just a child's life, but a family's life. These families that are in poverty, and it's just a bad situation. So check out fillthestadium.com. Let's fill those 20,000 remaining seats with Compassion International. All right, let's get to our conversation with Dave and Ann Wilson. The new book is called No Perfect Parents. They also wrote a book called Vertical Marriage when they were last on this show, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can listen to the first conversation we had with them a couple years ago. But this book is a game changer. Parents, listen up. If you're not a parent yet, listen up. This is really good stuff here from Dave and Ann Wilson joining us on Sports Spectrum. Ditch expectations, embrace reality, and discover the one secret that will change your parenting. I don't even know if we can give away the secret on this show. We'll have to see. Dave and Ann Wilson, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Jason.
Great to see you, Jason. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Always good to see both of you. You're two of my favorite people. And I think perfect people to write a book like this. No perfect.
Yeah, we're perfect.
Parents.
I like perfect.
Well, I'm saying you're perfect people to write a book about not being perfect.
Yeah.
So that works out well. I want to get to the book in a second, but before we start there, you know, we saw each other back in October, where we were down in Arkansas, and you were so nice in having me on your show to talk about.
Great, by the way.
That was great stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a wonderful conversation, and hopefully people will go back and listen to it. But there's so much that's taken place. I didn't really have a good opportunity or a long time to chat with you guys and ask you about 2020. And perspective is always good when you're a couple. It's always good as a follower of Christ. So when you look back to the last 12 or 13 months, church leadership, parenting, you know, speaking, traveling, all of these things that you normally are a part of stopped. What was this like for you this last year? Maybe I'll start with Ann first.
Well, it was interesting, like it was for everybody. Hard in certain ways. Like I lost my mom, not to COVID, but right before that. And then my dad, who's 92, was alone in an assisted living, and none of us could see him. And so like there are really hard things about it. It was tricky in trying to navigate the fear. Like some of our kids were really fearful. Others were like, this is nothing. And so just navigating all of that with the political and all the unrest of the country. Yeah. But the good thing I felt for Dave and I was it gave us time to pull back. We've been together more than we've ever been in our lives. And I think that was actually really fun for us. It gave us a chance to breathe, but also to sink really deep in our walk with God. Like just we had more time to be in the Word. You know, we're people that are on the go, but this gave us just some time to really sink back deep in our walk with God.
How about you, Dave?
Yeah, I can jump in and say at first, and I think we all experienced this, it was extremely difficult. You know, I think it was hard for me to slow down.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's kind of admitted he's a workaholic.
Yeah. I mean, I like action and the next thing on the calendar, and we were traveling and speaking and doing vertical marriage weekends or you name it.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize we were going at too fast a pace to sustain really not just a ministry, but our own personal walk with God. Because I mean, we all know this, but it's easy to forget is ministry should be an overflow of what God's doing in us, you know, and it can become just a business and you can do it out of your flesh. And I think as bad as hard as the pandemic has been, it did force us to slow down. There's a thing, you know, it's actually scary to think about this, but one of the things God put in the 10 commandments of all places is a thing called Sabbath, rest. Yes. And, you know, if I'm God, there's no way I'm putting that as my top 10. I mean, it's important, but come on, not the top 10. Yeah. And yet the fact that God makes Sabbath rest, one of the 10 commandments, means it is very important for us spiritually, emotionally, physically. And the pandemic actually caused us to sort of slow down. I didn't want to. I don't think any of us wanted to. And focus on what really matters. So again, Ann said, we've been together a lot. It forced us to work on our marriage and enjoy one another and to slow down and spend time with God. Again, it's a long answer, but it's been good. I think it's really been good.
You said something interesting too, I think, when you mentioned your walks with God were important and you're in ministry. And I found this with me now that I'm in ministry, that I can sometimes get caught up in letting the ministry work that I do kind of in my brain think that it counts towards my relationship with God.
Yes.
Like I'm talking about God and I'm sharing Jesus with hundreds and thousands of people every day. And you guys obviously talk and share with a lot of people. So that's a pressure point, Ann, I guess, for you guys to always remember that the ministry is great work, but it's not to replace the most important thing.
I know that I've said to our staff at Kensington, like the greatest danger of being in full-time ministry is that God becomes your job. And so even if you're studying to be in the Word, to give a message, or you're kind of talking leadership points, it can be like, oh, I'm learning this to give it away instead of letting it kind of overflow out of what's already so rich in my heart.
I mean, and, you know, as a pastor, obviously, and an NFL chaplain, I'd be reading the Word. I know a lot of people do this. And instead of reading it for me, I'm like, oh, I got a message here. I can preach this to the Lions. I can preach it to church. And I don't even sit with it.
Of what God's saying to you.
Yeah. And I got to be honest, you know, we've been in church leadership for 30 years. And it's rare. I don't want to say this out loud, but it's rare to see a great marriage among pastors.
Wow.
Because we sort of get addicted to our ministry, and the feedback from the people is more important than the feedback from my wife. And I think NFL players and celebrities can do the same thing. It's like you live out in the public, you live your life in front of people, and you don't realize this private relationship with your spouse or with your kids is critical, you know, and you can fake almost fake ministry. You get good at it. You learn, what to say in a sermon that people go, oh, wow, that was great. And, you neglect your marriage, and it's sad, but we got to do it. And that's what our vertical marriage book was about is,
yes.
I was neglecting our marriage, and God sort of said, no, we got to do this the right way. And we got to build the foundation from the bottom up.
Well, and Jason, maybe you can relate to this. I remember telling Dave, like, I want to be married to the guy that's on the stage, and I think wives can get this, like that guy that you are in public, that guy is cool. Like I want him to live in my house with all that energy.
She actually said those very words. Of course, she said them at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday night. In fact, it was after preaching 4 sermons that weekend, spending the afternoon on the Lions sideline, losing another football game, coming home and being exhausted. And she's like, I want the guy who's on the stage to live here. And I'm like, I literally, Jason, I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, on the stage, you're inspiring, you're casting vision, you pray with passion. And then you come here and
you're like, you go ahead and pray.
Yeah.
You go ahead and lead.
And I wish I could say yeah, you're right. I blew up, man. I was like, you don't realize how good you got it. I'm the most amazing husband. I know what husbands are like. They're duds, man. And I'm a good one. And
I'm sure that ended well. Yeah, I'm sure that ended
really well.
I kind of didn't say anything after that. My timing was really poor.
Well, the good thing is, I want to finish this story, is the next day I sat with God and said, is that true? And he's like, yep.
Yeah.
And it was simply a moment for me to say, I need to step up and bring as much or more energy into my home and my marriage as I bring to my job.
Amen.
Yeah, I'll amen that too. Hopefully everybody listening is amening at this exact moment with Dave and Ann Wilson, who's joining us here on Sports Spectrum. And their new book is called No Perfect Parents, which we're going to talk about in a second. Dave, I need to ask you, you mentioned obviously being with the Detroit Lions as a team chaplain. I was privileged, as I mentioned, to be a guest on your show, the Family Life program. And on that show, when we were talking about leadership, you told an amazing story to your audience when you displayed what it meant to be a servant leader. And I know we're kind of zigzagging in and out of different topics here on the show, but I just thought that was such a powerful story that I wanted our audience and the people who listen to this show to hear it as well. And it was regarding you in the locker room and just having a moment when you understood what it meant to serve. Can you share?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I hate to admit that it was like, I was a chaplain for 33 seasons. I think it was like year 20 or 21 when this hit me. It should have hit me day one. But literally, I was standing in the locker room after a game, and I'm on the sideline and, with the team on the road, that kind of thing. So I come in the locker room, and normally what I would do after a game, and it's sort of awkward. You're like, okay, what's my role? I sort of wander around the locker room, and if there's a guy that wants to talk, I'd be there to talk to him about his life or about the game. And again, we lost some games, so I'd be there to sort of console. Some guys get hurt, so I go in the training room. Anyway, I'm standing there, and I'm like, okay, who do I talk to today? Where do I go? And I'm watching what's happening in the locker room right in front of me, and I see our equipment guys running all around the locker room, taking the guys' jerseys off their shoulder pads, cleats, pants, you name it, putting them all in these bags that we zip up, or they zipped up and put on a truck, and we get on the plane and fly home. And I'm just sitting there thinking, gee whiz, these guys work their tails off, and nobody cares. Nobody even acknowledges it. And there's several of them doing this. And I just thought, I literally had this thought, what would Jesus do? Remember those bracelets? What would Jesus do?
WWJD.
Yeah. I mean, that was a thing at the time. And I remember just standing there looking, and I'm like, I know what Jesus would do. He would be serving these guys. Whatever the need was, Jesus would meet it and serve and love and honor these guys. And so it's funny. I went over to one of the equipment guys who I sort of knew, but they weren't coming to chapel. They just knew me. He's the chaplain dude. He's that religious guy. And so I walked over to one of them and I said, hey man, I'd love to help you. How can I help? And I'm not kidding. He looked at me and he just goes, yeah, right, dude. Like, you want to help us? I go, really? I'd like to help. He goes, get out of the way. And he just pushed by me. Like, I don't need you religious people to come over here and act like you're going to try and help. So he was not going to let me help. I mean, I don't even know if I shared that part of the story. So, I mean, he just walked off, sort of, mean. And so I'm like looking like, okay, I can figure this out. So I realized they all put on hospital gloves because of the blood and stuff on the jerseys to protect themselves. So I go in the training room, I find them, I put them on, and I just started doing what they're doing. I didn't ask. I just like, okay, take the jersey off. And by the way, this is hard to do. I thought it'd be an easy thing to rip off an NFL jersey off shoulder pads. They're taped on. There's double-sided tape. You got to peel them off. Yeah. It's not an easy deal. And then, so it took me a while to figure it out. But yeah, I get it in the bag. I zip up the bag. I looked, where do they take the bags? And there's a whole procedure, and it's got to be done really quick because we got to get on a plane in an hour. So anyway, I started doing that. And it became a routine. Every game, I walk in. Next thing I know, which is beautiful, these equipment guys like me. They're like, hey, man, what's your name again? Dave. Okay, hey, Dave, come over here. I become like in with these guys, and I'm like part of their group. And we're the last guys to leave the locker room. Everybody's on the buses. They're all ready to go. We don't even get to shower. We're covered with sweat, but we've got everything packed in the bags. And I remember one time, like the 4th or 5th week I'm doing this, I'm on my knees right by Josh McCown's locker. He was our quarterback at the time.
Yeah.
And he just leans over to me because he's been watching me now do this for several weeks. And he goes, and Josh is a guy, comes to chapel, and he's a good friend. And he has a heart for Jesus to serve others. And I'll never forget, he just leans over and under his breath, he goes, I see what you're doing. And I just look at him, I go, what am I doing, Josh? He goes, you are doing what Jesus would do. Dude, this is having more of an impact than anything you've ever said.
Wow.
And I talked to him later. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, dude, everybody watches everybody. And they see the chaplain not doing a religious thing, like giving a message or preaching the Bible. They see the chaplain just serving people. And they know this isn't your job. He's like, dude, this has had more of an impact on this locker room than any sermon you've ever preached. And that isn't why I did it. That was never my intent. But it did. I mean, I started seeing guys come to chapel that never came. And I think it's because they saw somebody that was in humility serving them. And they said, I want to hear what that guy has to say. And then I get to say, this isn't me. I would have never done this in my own strength. This is who Jesus is. And this is how he loves you and serves you. So it was a really beautiful moment in all the years of 33 years of ministry. That is one of the most powerful things I'll ever take away from those years.
And even the equipment guys, like you're texting them, they really became good friends.
Yeah. When they were going through something, they reached out to me. And, one of the greatest things is at the end of the season, and this never happened before, the head equipment guy would send me a box, and it had all the clothes I wore all during the season. I never got that stuff before, but now I'm in.
Wow. And swag city.
I got swag. Yeah. It was cool.
That's awesome. I love that story. And thank you for sharing it again, because even though this isn't going to be a large amount of the conversation on servant leadership, I just thought when I heard that, there's a lot of people here who are wondering, how can I evangelize? How can I tell others about Jesus? And sometimes it's showing others about Jesus before you can ever even tell them, right?
Yeah. And I think, as we all know, I mean, serving another person is a magnet.
Yeah.
Nobody resists that. They are drawn to that. And I think we're great in the church at talking and not real good at serving, getting on our knees, getting low and just saying, I'm going to bow down and honor somebody by my action. And people are drawn to that, man. We want people to come to Christ, just serve them. And by the way, we're talking about parenting today. It's what a parent does as well. When you serve your kids, I'm not saying let them run all over you, but when you honor them by serving them, it is a powerful witness to the God that serves us.
Well, I was even thinking about in the winter, we're in Michigan, so we have horrible winters. Yeah. We've got this big snowblower. And so we'll do our driveway, but then we'll go over to the neighbors and have the kids, hey, let's go do the neighbors too. And they might complain about it when they're teenagers, like, this is dumb. I didn't sign up for this. But I just think as parents, it's a great example for our kids.
Let's take a quick break from our conversation to tell you a little bit more about Compassion International and their Fill the Stadium initiative. Due to COVID-19, 70,000 children and their families in the Compassion programs needed your urgent support. You see, 70,000 is the capacity of the average pro football stadium, and that's where the idea for Fill the Stadium came about. And it's a stadium that cannot remain empty, and your help is needed here for these children in crisis, just looking for basic necessities like food and education and medical care and vocational training, things like that. Your donation will help these children and their families through the critical next 12 months. And great updates here. You know, our goal is to help 70,000 kids. Well, so far we filled almost 50,000 seats of those 70,000 kids. So you are doing an amazing work, and many of our pro athlete friends have donated large amounts of money as well. And it's just really neat to see the body come together in a need of crisis. But the work isn't finished yet. Still got about 20,000 kids and their families that are in desperate need of help. So you can help restore what COVID-19 destroyed and help provide essential food, medical care, and support for a child and their family during this pandemic. Go to fillthestadium.com to donate, to make a difference in a child's life and their family's life at fillthestadium.com. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty. Again, fillthestadium.com. Dave and Ann Wilson are joining us here on Sports Spectrum. They're with Family Life Today and now two-time authors. Their first book was called Vertical Marriage, and their latest is out April 13th, and it's called No Perfect Parents. And, you know, I'm a parent to an almost 17-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking I still need to read this because I haven't got it right for 16 and a half years, but I'm still hoping that I can right some of the wrongs going down the road here. But Ann, I want to start with you and diving into this book called No Perfect Parents. You wrote about marriage. You guys wrote about marriage in your first book, and now parenting. So tell us about the book, why you guys decided to write this one.
Well, I mean, I feel like we have a couple passions in our lives. One, of course, Jesus is, but marriage has always been a passion. And part of that is because we almost lost our marriage. And then parenting, if you're a parent, that's all consuming. Yeah. And so I don't know about you, Jason, but we have found ourselves like on our knees thinking, we don't know what to do. You know, I have this, my soapbox is, man, we go to school all these years to learn a vocation, and yet we have no training on how to parent and how to have a great marriage. And so the only models we have are our parents, and those aren't always great models. Yeah. And so we're like, oh, we have this passion to help people to have some tools to think, this is what God's word says about parenting. Here's some practical tips and tools. And also, you're going to blow it. You're not going to be perfect, but here's kind of a target. And that's what we talk about. What's your aim? What's your target? What are you trying to raise? And that's really been fun for us. Our kids are all adults now. They're all married. We have grandkids. And so we feel like we're finally at this point, like, oh, maybe we're to the point now we can actually say something about it.
Dave?
Because when they're teenagers, you're just like, oh, no.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Dave, help me as a dad to a teenager. I know you didn't have girls, but you've been around the in-laws, if you will, and been around enough people to know. And I think the principles are the same. But help me here. I got an almost 17-year-old who's about 15 months away from graduating high school. And we're talking about colleges now and, you know, finances and where you're going to go and what's your future like. And she's better now. I told people this when she was in 8th and 9th grade. I'm like, tell me it gets better. And it has. I'm so glad. They've said it's gotten better, and it has. She's an awesome kid. Mm. I would not go back to those 12 and 13 and 14-year-old range for anything. They were so awkward and so difficult. But where should us who are in my journey, I guess, where I am in my late 40s and getting ready to kind of send my kid off to college and thinking about what's that shift that you guys had to go through, Dave, with parenting when you saw your kids starting to grow up and, you know, eventually go away to school and then live the rest of their life?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we tried to do in No Perfect Parents, the book, is lay out 4 different parenting stages or seasons that you go through. You're in we call it the coaching stage, but you know, obviously, and we're not going to go through all these, but you have the 0 to 5, we call it the discipline stage, which is exhausting.
Yes, it is.
And you're trying to set discipline and instruction. And Ephesians 6:4 says, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So we try to say, okay, what's that look like? And again, that's exhausting. You got to set these boundaries and enforce them. And then you go into the, sort of the training stage, which is a little older, up to about age 12. And then you're in the teenage phase.
Well, wait, let me go back to the training phase, because I thought this was really important for us to learn, is that when you're in those years of 0 through 12, the window of your influence is wide open.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like they are listening to you. They're watching you. They're clinging to your words. And then the scary thing is, nobody told us, but that window starts to close of your influence. And so around the age of 13, your voice now is very small, because now they're listening to the influence of their peers.
Yes.
They're going out for that. And so I would say to people, don't forget this training phase. You use that phase of training big time, because that's when your voice is the loudest and that's when you have the most influence. But then we felt like our most fun years were in that.
Yeah.
coaching.
I mean, I opened our teenage chapter with a story of a teenage kid. He was actually a sophomore in high school, who this high school baseball coach told me this story years ago, that he had went out on a date with his wife, came home, they went to bed early. His name was Woody. He woke up like 2 a.m. and went downstairs to get a cup of coffee or orange juice or something. He said, I'm sitting in my family room at 2 or 3 a.m. just because I can't sleep. And I look out on my patio and I see my high school shortstop standing on my patio at 3 a.m. He's like, I'm looking out there like, what in the world's going on? I realize that's my high school shortstop. And this kid starts taking his clothes off. And he's like, what is this kid doing? He realizes he's streaking, and he goes running off. And he's like, what did I just watch? Because there's baseball practice at 8 a.m. that next morning.
Yeah.
And so the next morning, Woody says this kid shows up and he starts, making jokes about, hey, I saw you running wild last night. And this kid's looking at him like, what? Because the kid had no idea that he was standing on his head baseball coach's backyard.
Oh my gosh.
Like that same kid, I tell the story in the teenage chapter, later went to a club near his house an hour away and drank too much, was driving home, realizing he shouldn't be driving, and went on the back roads with his buddy, and they stopped for a train to go by. And it was so long, he puts the car in park and he passes out.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Wakes up at 6 a.m. Fortunately, the car was in park, and this was back before cell phones. So his mom is going crazy, not knowing where her son is. Wow. Anyway, I just say, man, these are the teenage years where you have kids doing stupid, crazy things like that. The thing nobody knows until they get to the end of that story is that kid was me.
Oh, wow.
That was me.
Wow.
I was at a party. What Woody, my baseball coach, didn't know his next door neighbor's daughter was having a slumber party, and all of us guys went there, and somebody said somebody should go streaking, and I'm the idiot that says I'll do it. And then and then I was drinking too much, and I should have never gotten in a car. Thank God I'm still alive and didn't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
But that's an introduction to the teenage years that all of us as parents fear that's going to be our kid.
Yes.
And one of the things I try to say in the book is, my mom never thought I would turn into anything. And some of you parents think the same thing about your teenager right now.
Yes.
Have hope, because God can do miracles. Here I am sitting today. I haven't gone streaking in at least 20 years.
That's good to hear, Dave. That's good.
but listen to this, Jason. So we our youngest son had broken his ankle playing baseball, and he had a cast on it. And Dave at that time had this old, it was a convertible Mustang. And this kid, Cody, had never driven this car. And he's like, Dad, I just turned 16. And Dave had decided to sell it. He's like, Dad, please let me drive it. Please let me drive it before you sell it. And so sure enough, Dave caves in. He's like, okay, I'm going to let you drive it. And it has a big engine, but son, basically, I'm going to let you do this.
Yeah.
And it didn't turn out well.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a long story, but he ended up driving the car into the back of our garage wall.
because he had a cast on his right foot.
I mean,
he couldn't feel the gas.
I should have never let him have the car that night, but my wife convinced me he'd be okay.
No, I didn't. That was on you.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, it's just.
But not to scare you, Jason.
Teenage years are crazy. And I got to tell you, that story ended actually beautiful, because when I got home, he wasn't here. He was so afraid.
Because I told him. Yeah. He called me. We were out.
We know.
We were out for dinner, and he says, Mom, this is what happened. I said, leave the car. You just need to go away for a little bit tonight so that Dad can cool down.
Yeah, go sleep over at a friend's house. Go somewhere.
Yeah. So he wasn't even there when we got home. And when I first saw it, I was the dad that was like, I can't believe he did this. How could this happen? And before he got home, which was an hour and a half later, I just got to the point, and every parent I hope can get there.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, it's a car. It's a piece of metal. I'm not going to ruin $1 million kid over a $4,000 car. And so by the time he got home, I'll never forget, he walks in the house.
Crying.
I'm sitting on the floor watching TV, and he just stands at the entry to the family room, and he's like, Dad, I am so sorry. I know you love that car. You're going to sell it tomorrow. And I'm like, come here, nude, sit down beside me. And he couldn't believe that I was not going to scream and yell. And I just said, you know what? It's okay. It's a car. It's a piece of metal. We can get it fixed. I'll sell it later. It's no big deal. And then I remember looking at it and saying, and you're going to pay half.
Right. There's still responsibility there at the same time. Well, this is such a weird dynamic at this age, because you want it to go by fast because it's the teen years. And you're like, let's just get to 20, and they start to become an adult, and there's maturity on some levels. And then there's just the growing up where you can enjoy your kids in a different way. But it's also, you still yearn. I mean, we have this app, you probably have it on your phone. It's called Time Hop, right? And it just shows you what you posted. I mean, for me, it goes back to the first post on Facebook like 13 years ago. So it's got this amazing scrapbook of memories of my daughter when she was 6 and 7 and 8. And even last night, we were in the bedroom, me and my wife and Sarah came in, and we were just showing her pictures when she was 7 or 8 years old. I'm like, do you remember this? And it's wonderful. But then you realize how fast it's going. So you want to kind of make time stop. So there's that dynamic, but then you want it to kind of get past this so you can move on to that next phase. It's a tough.
Yeah. I remember, we both remember, with all three of our boys, you're trying to seize every day. Yeah. Because they're leaving in 6 months or 9 months. And you're like, oh my goodness, as hard as it's been. And you're sort of like, I hope they grow up. Now you're like, oh, I want to seize every moment and grab them. And, one of the things that we wrote in this chapter I found very interesting about teenagers is they're pulling away. In middle school, they start saying, drop me off a block from school. I don't want anybody to see, And at first you're like, wait, they're pulling away and they don't want you around. And yet the truth is they really do. Yeah. They still want a relationship with their parents. But what a lot of parents do, and we could have done this too, is we pull back because they're pulling away. And yet we need to step back as parents of teenagers and say, number one, it's totally normal that they're pulling away. Yes. Because they're addicted to something as teenagers. And I never understood this till I read Shanti Feldhahn's book about teenagers. She said they're addicted to freedom. They're becoming adults. And so freedom is something they want. So it's totally normal that they're pulling away. But at the other side, instead of us pulling back, we should, and I wrote it in the book, we should pursue. So grab moments with our teenage kids, even though they're going to say, I don't want to hang out with you, Dad, tonight. I don't want to go to dinner or whatever. Go to dinner. Grab a meal with them. Grab a moment with them. Just don't stop pursuing them. Pursue them. Now, of course, you can't be overbearing and like be with them every second, but it's like, man, grab those moments because, like you said, Jason, they're going to be gone in a minute. Yeah. Yes. And you're going to blink, and they're going to regret it too. So it's like, seize those moments while you can.
I think we also felt that urgency to speak life into them. And I think as teenagers, I did this, at least their early teen years. You're just so scared of what they're doing and they're irritating and you're bugged by them. And you're like, oh man, they're messing up. And so I found myself critiquing more in their teenage years. Like, don't do this. You should do this. And I realized like, man, this is not feeding their souls. I can critique sometimes, but I need to be pouring more praise into them than critiquing. And there was one night, it was when, gosh, this is our same son. It was his senior year. It was in the spring. He had already signed a scholarship, full ride to play football in college. Yeah. And I knew that he was probably struggling in his faith right then. But this one night, he's getting ready for bed, and he came into my room, and he just said, good night. And I said, hey, and I kind of, he's this big guy. I take him by the shoulders and say, hey, I just want to remind you, like, I am so proud of you. Look at the man that you're becoming. You're such a leader. You're such an influencer. I don't even think you know the power you have when you communicate. People want to follow you. And you're gonna take this into college, and people are gonna want to follow you. You're inspiring. Even your walk with God, like, it's amazing when you talk about God. You're compelling. Yeah. And I just thought, I just love who you are and who God's made you to be. And it was funny. He's like, whatever, Mom. He says goodnight. He goes in the other room. Probably 2 minutes later, he comes back in the room, and tears are coming down his cheeks. And he goes, Mom, all that stuff you just said to me. I'm like, yeah. He goes, none of it's true. That's not who I am. Wow. He goes, I just got so wasted last weekend, Mom. That's who I am. And it was so funny as a parent, your first rule of teenagers is don't freak out, just stay calm.
You can freak out later.
Yeah, just fake it. And I remember I looked at him and said, no, that's exactly all those words I said. That's exactly who you are. Wow. That may be what you did last weekend, but that doesn't define you. And that is not who you are. This is who you are, because that's who God's created you to be. And he really didn't say much, but afterward I thought, I need to do that more, because teenagers, we're all insecure. They all want to hear their parents speak life over them.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's funny because those knucklehead teenagers now have given you 5 grandchildren, right? So it's like, okay, now we're reaping the benefits of all of this. How's it feel to be grandparents right now? And that's the next stage. This is no perfect parents, but I think we have a lot of people on this who are entering that stage or who have become grandparents, and it's a different dynamic than being parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe we're that old that we have grandkids.
You look good, though, Dave. You look good.
Yeah, you do.
I hope so. I mean, it is like a second chance to do it right,
It is.
To raise these. It's so beautiful. I mean, our kids, it's amazing how our 3 sons have turned out, and they married these incredible women. Yeah. It's funny, not funny. It's interesting. When our oldest son, CJ, was born 34 years ago, I made a commitment to take Fridays and pray and fast for my kids. So I don't eat on Fridays.
Wow.
It was interesting. I remember I used to lead the Lions Bible study on Fridays in the locker room, and they'd all get something to eat and come in, and they're like, oh, Dave doesn't eat. And so I would just pray all day, for CJ, and then Austin, and then Cody. I prayed for their wives that we didn't know yet, that they would be women of integrity and purity and
love God.
And so I'm still doing that, some almost 40 years later. And I got to tell you, Jason, on their wedding day was powerful, because I'm not only the pastor, but I'm the dad. And so I'm standing in our chapel, and I'm looking at CJ, and then Robin, his wife, and she has no idea.
Performing the wedding.
Yeah, I'm looking at her doing the vows, and I'm like, she has no idea. I've been praying for her probably before she was born.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking at Robin and Kendall and Jenna and thinking, God, you are amazing. Yeah. Again, not that we're perfect, not that our kids are perfect, but that's the joy of being a parent, is you get to take them before God and say, I'm going to ask you, God, to do something we could never do. We can't raise kids to honor you, but you can. So help us to steward this and do as good a job as we can.
And it's the manifestation of prayer too, which is just so powerful. People think, I can start praying today, and you can, but man, if you got little ones, start praying for their futures right now. I wrote a blog, which is, I guess, my way of praying when Sarah was like 11 or 12, and it was a letter to my future son-in-law.
Wow.
And that's what it was. I got to go find it, by the way. I haven't read it in like 4 years, but I pray every day, just like you said, God, I just pray for Sarah's future husband, that he would be a godly man who loves you and that loves her, but loves you first and then loves her in such a wonderful way. I'm glad, because that's kind of affirmation for me to know that you did that, and why that's so important. As we wind down, I want to be mindful to our time. Again, the book is called No Perfect Parents. we wanted to ask for one more story. And I know it was just the first chapter of the book. I haven't even read it yet because I just got my copy a couple days ago. But the chapter stood out. And I'm like, all right, Monday Night Football and Parenting 101. So we got to hear the Monday Night Football story and maybe a little bit about that chapter, and then we'll close the ship down.
Well, I mean, it's a long story, but the gist of it is our first son was born in 1986.
Okay.
And Anne was pregnant, like month 8, like 8 months pregnant. So he's not going to come for another 4 to 5 weeks. And we go to bed, and I'm sound asleep. And I have this dream that I've never forgotten. And the dream was the Lions are playing the Bears, 1986, on Monday Night Football. And if you know anything about the Bears, they had just won the Super Bowl. This is the Super Bowl Shuffle Bears. Jim McMahon, Walter Payton, all this stuff, the Refrigerator Perry, right? And so we're playing on Monday Night Football. And again, it's a dream. So the Silverdome at the time is 85,000 full, and it's crazy, and it's Monday Night Football. And we had 2 quarterbacks on our roster back then, Chuck Long from Iowa and Joe Ferguson, a veteran, had been around a while.
Sure.
Long story short, second quarter, Chuck Long gets hurt and is gone. He's out for the game. Oh. Joe goes in, first play, gets hurt, like unconscious. Oh. And so we have I don't know why, but we didn't have a third string quarterback on our roster at the time. And we're like, what in the world are we going to do? And all of a sudden in this dream, I see Darryl Rogers turn and look up and down the sideline. And all of a sudden I hear him go, Wilson. And I look down there and he's pointing at me. Wilson, get over here. And I run over and he goes, dude, TV timeout, get in the locker room. You're going in. I'm like, what do you mean I'm going in? He goes, you're a Hall of Famer from Ball State. We need you. We don't have a quarterback. Get dressed. So I run in the locker room. I come out. He sends me in. It's 3rd and long because they both got sacked, and he's like, all fade. So I get in the huddle. And it's just this great moment, I'm on my knee and I'm like, guys, we're going deep. Let's go. Give me protection. And so I'll never forget. I walk up in the huddle, in the dream, it's like slow-mo at this point. I walk up and I put my hands under the center and I look over and there's Ann in the 3rd row, 85,000 people, but there's Ann winking at me and I'm blue 16 hit. I drop back. I'll never forget this dream. Richard Dent comes flying in, remember him, all pro, and I make him miss with this little twist, and he goes flying by me. And I step up and I look down the left sideline and Jeff Chadwick was beating his guy. And so I let this baby fly. And man, I mean, in this dream, it's this perfect tight spiral sailing down the left sideline. He's 5 yards behind his guy. The ball's coming down. He's going to catch it about the 3 and walk into the end zone. It's just dropping right down over his outside shoulder. It's perfect, right? And the ball's just about to hit his hands. And all of a sudden I hear, my water just broke. And I'll never forget, I'm like, what? And I wake up and Ann's shaking me, I'm awake and I'm like, what? She goes, my water just broke. And I remember thinking, water doesn't break, water flows and drips and, but what are you talking? And I didn't realize, oh my goodness, we're going to have a baby tonight. So anyway, that's Monday Night Football.
I'm going to the bathroom. He goes, I was just having this amazing dream. And I'm like, I don't care about the dream. We're having a baby. He goes, oh, I need to see how it ends.
Yeah.
That's
so
amazing.
There you go. That's how our parenting journey started. We walk in the hospital. I'll tell you this to end it. And I'm looking at Ann and there's something hanging off her heel, because we rushed there, baby number 1. We don't know what we're doing. We zoom over to the hospital and she's walking in front of me. And I realize her underwear is hanging off her heel as we walk in the hospital.
Oh my goodness.
Welcome to Parenting 101.
It's funny hearing that story. I thought you were going to say when you were dreaming and they said, go in, you're playing quarterback, Wilson, that was kind of what it's like to become a parent because you're not prepared. And you have no experience and you have no training and you just throw you in the game. That's good, right?
That's really good.
We need to change that chapter because you're going to fumble a lot and throw picks.
And have turnovers.
Yeah.
And you don't get to choose when they put you in the game, unfortunately. When it's time, you're going in and you're going to be the quarterback.
Do the best you can.
Such a great point with that.
That is awesome. They are Dave and Ann Wilson. And again, the new book, No Perfect Parents, Ditch Expectations, Embrace Reality, and Discover the One Secret that will change your parenting. You got to get the book if you want to find out the secret. Right. And it's available April 13th, No Perfect Parents. You guys are the best. Thanks, Dave and Ann. Appreciate you coming back on the show.
Thank you. Love doing it.
Thanks, Jason.
And many thanks to Dave and Ann Wilson. Aren't they the best? I mean, when you listen to them and when you get to meet them, and I've had the fortune to meet them a few times and get to hang out with them, and they are the same off the air that they are on the air. Encouraging, fun, just awesome people, and really good at what they do. Not just speaking, and they're speaking around the country, so you should check them out if you want to have them speak to your church or your audience. But their new books, the Vertical Marriage book from a couple years ago is a game changer. Whenever anybody asks me about a book that they can read on marriage, I always recommend Dave and Ann's book, Vertical Marriage. It's an awesome book. You need to go check it out. And then their newest book is also a game changer, and this one is called No Perfect Parents. And thankfully, we can all know that none of us are perfect, but we can get it right when we follow the blueprint that Dave and Ann write about. And you heard the stories, right? This book is chock full of these stories, these kind of stories that they shared on the podcast today. So you need to go get your copy. It's available everywhere books are sold and is out on Tuesday, April 13th. No Perfect Parents, Dave and Ann Wilson. Awesome people and great guests here today on Sports Spectrum. We thank them. We thank you for tuning in as well. Do us a quick favor before you say goodbye. Make sure you rate and review and subscribe to this podcast. It helps us get the word out. Tell someone about Sports Spectrum if you could. We continue to want to grow and want to get Jesus to as many people as possible through the lens of sports in this media ministry, Sports Spectrum. And it comes down to people like you telling one, telling two, telling three people about Sports Spectrum. Maybe you text them the link to this podcast with Dave and Ann Wilson. If you know parents who are struggling, this might be a good podcast for them to listen to. Maybe you text them the website, sportspectrum.com. That's a great idea. They can read about stories. There's daily devotionals there. They can listen to our podcasts. Or maybe you're looking for an actual tangible resource in your hand to give to someone, and that's where the Sports Spectrum magazine comes into play. You can subscribe to the magazine. It's the only thing that we charge for here at Sports Spectrum, and it's super cheap. It's $18. $18 for an entire year subscription. I mean, if I asked you for a $20 bill and you knew it could go into a ministry to help spread the gospel of Jesus, you'd probably do that. But at the same time, you're going to get a magazine. You're going to get an actual print magazine in your hand, and you're going to get a digital version of the magazine that you can read and share on your phone or on your tablet or on your laptop. But you get a subscription. So it's a $20 sewing into the ministry for the year, but you also get our magazine. And I'm telling you, this magazine, I'll put it up against any magazine around. John Ackerman, Aaron Sauer, our team putting this magazine together have done a fantastic job. And right now, our spring issue is out. James McCann from the Mets is on the cover. It's a great magazine, a great resource to read, but also to share. Small group, life group, men's group, whatever it is, I would highly recommend the Sports Spectrum magazine. You can subscribe today, $18 for an entire year subscription over at sportspectrum.com. Thanks again for tuning in to today's show. We also want to thank our partners and sponsors, Compassion International. Check out fillthestadium.com to donate and to help release children from poverty over at fillthestadium.com. And we'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.